Great.
Good, good. So we're going to get started. This is our last meeting around this book, How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. This is the Casita Maria Book Club. Again, we're kind of having a conversation about being dedicated to the different voices and genres around Black and Brown literature. We come together to discuss these ideas. Sometimes they are very personal. You bring your personal views into this space. We welcome that. That makes this space a richer, more vibrant community. Some weeks you don't want to talk, you just want to listen. By all means, if we're catching you in between dinner, you just want to eat or drink your tea, go right ahead. We won't stop you, except for you, Brandon, because you got to talk. But anyway, Brandon Janice is the facilitator. She's going to be leading this week's conversation. It is the last week, like I said, so thank you all for coming. Brandon, want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Ron. Good evening, y'all. This book has been so great. I learned so much, and I was wondering these last pages were really sad for me. I was wondering if anyone wanted actually to start us off by maybe on a happier note, since some of the content that we're going to be talking about is so heavy. I was wondering if maybe we could start on like something that's a little happier. For example, if anyone has it's always nice to kind of recount or listen to, especially anyone who's like over the age of 40 or 45. It's always nice to recount and listen to if you can remember, if you can think about and remember like your happiest moments from childhood that you remember distinctively and because they made you so happy. For example, when I grew up in the 90s and tie-dye was really popular, like in my town, like the homemade tie-dye, like doing it yourself. And I am not kidding. I asked my mom, could I take all the clothes that I was so into it? I would do it in the backyard, and I was so into it that I asked my mom, could I take out I remember asking her, could I take out all my clothes that she had bought me and put them in garbage bags and put the tie-dye stuff where like my clothes were. That's how much tie-dye I had. Like I could fill a whole closet of it. And I don't remember doing it with anyone. Like I don't remember it being a happy memory because I was with my grandmother or my cousins. I remember being in the backyard like by myself. It was a small backyard we had at the time, and I remember being back there by myself, and just like taking anything I could find that was white. And like my mom gave me these like old bubble gum like buckets that she got from the bodega, and I would like make different colors in them, line them up, make different colors in them. And I think that's probably like, since that was probably second grade, since then I think that was probably like the first time I can remember feeling happy. Does that make sense? Does anyone can remember any like moments like that from your childhood? Maybe like the first time you remember feeling happy.
Now that Christmas is coming up, I got a red fire engine, and it had an actual ladder that worked on it. So it was a toy, but it was big. It was like about this big, but it had a ladder that, on the back of the fire engines, they have a ladder. And I don't know why that brought me so much joy, but that was it. And I cannot remember how old I was, but maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
That's it.
Somebody else? Y'all didn't go through childhood. Y'all just went straight to being adult.
I always loved skating. Outside, inside, we used to go skating all the time. So that's what I really love, skating and listening to the music. And we had our window pane jeans on. And Eat
Oh
cotton
wait, you
candy
mean
and
skating at the
everything.
roller rink?
Say again.
You're skating like at the roller rink?
Yes, at the roller rink. Yep, and it was right around the corner from my house. And we had the window pane jeans on, and you
What are
can
window
have
pane
cotton.
jeans?
I
Huh?
remember.
What are window pane jeans?
What
You,
youngin is asking that
I
question?
know, right, Ron?
Don't know that either.
What are they?
They probably come back in style since then, Ron. Huh?
I'm sure they will. They would.
I gotta search it out. What's the name again?
Window
Window
pane?
pane jeans.
Window
Blue
panes.
jeans. So
They
yeah,
would.
so we're in the
Time to
gym,
go to Google.
go to roller skating and the roller rink, listening to the music, eating the kind of cotton candy and everything else. And it's just fun. And the lights, they would turn the lights off and you could skate with somebody, and racing and all that. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That does sound fun.
Window pane jeans were jeans, of course, but they had seams that made squares all across, all up and down the jeans.
Oh, okay, I know
Oh.
exactly what you're talking
And
about.
they were white legged too.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
pictures now.
I had a
Well,
pair. Oh my God,
It's
those were
There you
so
go.
popular.
style.
Those were so popular when I was in middle school. I bet I was in TJ Maxx. I remember begging my mom to get me a pair. They were expensive. I
Oh
love
yeah, this was how long are we talking, Ron? I'm talking
I don't want to
maybe
date
40
you.
years ago. Am I telling my age?
Yeah, you are.
Google said it was the 70s when
Yeah,
it
the
started.
70s. Yeah, the 70s.
Early 70s, yeah.
They
But
came
it
back
was
in the
fun.
early
It was just
2000s.
fun. There was a certain day and it was just fun. It was all fun.
And let's be honest, back then they didn't call them jeans; they were dungarees. They were. I remember Saturdays in the neighborhood. Back then, the kids would go out and play Saturday mornings, and the dads would tinker with the cars. Back then, they were able to fix their own cars. They were able, to troubleshoot. So the dads would be out and the kids would be playing, and we'd play all morning and then go upstairs to do your chores with your mom later. So that was a warm memory for me.
Yeah, my grandmother is still a hairstylist. And so when I was younger, and even today, like when she's doing hair, and she basically, the only thing she does, and it's a small Arkansas town, is press people's hair. Everybody, young kids, older ladies, they particularly like it. And like whenever my friends' hair would fall out from, their parents putting perm in it and they'd have to cut it or whatever, they would always send the kids to my grandmother's house and she would press their hair. And then I even have, people who know my grandmother in town, they'd be like, your grandmother grew my hair. And so anyway, so when I was probably about 5, the Barbie with the really big head with the hair, and it had like, it came with like eyeshadow and all this other stuff, but mostly it was about the hair because you could pretend to be your own stylist. And I was just like, I know I'm going to be a hairstylist. And yeah, so I remember that toy probably better than any other toy. And of course, by the time I got done with it, it was bald headed and had marker and everything else on it. But I love that doll. And yeah, and I still have a passion for hair. I'm not like licensed or anything like that, but I still enjoy it.
Isn't that nice thinking about like what made you genuinely happy when you were a kid? We can jump into it unless anyone else wants to share the first time they can remember they were genuinely happy.
I can share. So for me, I grew up, part of my childhood was spent in Dominican Republic. That's where I was born. And I remember I used to love making mud pies. That was my favorite thing.
Wait, I'm sorry. I know what mud pies are, but can you give me a...
It's just mud and you make it look like a pie. So pretty much, yeah. So I had so many just laying around, and I will use like rocks like as decorative thing and color them. So yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about it like a real mud pie, like with the chocolate mousse pie. It's like similar to a tiramisu. You're talking about a real DR, like literally.
Yeah, this is as a child, like probably 6 or 7-year-old me. I would just like wet the dirt and like make pies, pretend to, yeah.
That's cool. You know, when chapter 18 started, like I knew the mom was going to pass away immediately. But I was wondering like how y'all felt about a couple of things. There's so much to unpack in these like last few pages. But like I want to like kind of hear what y'all had to say about like the pacing of him Saeed getting to the mother's death, and kind of maybe how that like coincides with real life. Like everyone's lost someone, and kind of how it like slows down time almost, even if you know they're going to go if they're sick. How like that idea of getting closer to the end, kind of those first like last days, like really slowing down time, and kind of how he mirrored that in the writing with these last few pages. Does that make sense? Did anyone else like feel like that?
Yeah, I recognized that like he totally stopped talking about, you know, his sexcapades and his interactions with other people. It was just solely based on that. So it jumped from like this part to like totally this part, and nothing merged in between the two of those things. Because you know, you would think you're still living at that time. You know, I wondered if, you know, he had any cousins, or, you know, I mean, I know he had his uncles and his aunts and all of them, but I just wonder, you know, there was somebody his age where he could let his hair down, or was it strictly just the regimen of, you know, going to the hospital, going, you know, home, walking the dog, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely tell it was something. I mean, and why wouldn't it be? You know, that would be very understated to say that it was a pivotal part in his life.
You know, I, I I was a little bit cynical about these last few chapters. It seemed like he was trying to uh, be redemptive in his life and how he presented his life up until these last few chapters. Like I didn't like Saeed. I thought he was too much of a predator in his life. Um, in these last few chapters, he's trying to ask the reader for forgiveness.
Fascinating.
Um, and he was like, I didn't like anything about that, the middle part of, I mean, I liked the way it was written and I liked, you know, the quality of the storytelling, but him as a person, I didn't care for much. And now these last few chapters, he's kind of like put all of that out of the book and just focused on these sort of caring relationships that seem completely lost or not included in the middle of the book. And that could be purposeful. This is a memoir that he wrote. So he is kind of choosing, you know, picking and choosing for dramatic effect. And that's sort of the arc of a book where it's kind of like really, you know, heavy and meaty in the middle, and it kind of wraps everything up in the end. But by the time the end came, I had already decided, it was like, yo, you've done too much bad stuff, or maybe not bad, but you've lived your life in a way that like I don't want to know you now. Like because your mom dies doesn't make you a good person. And I felt like that's what he was trying to do or say in the book.
Mm. Maybe like, I mean, and I agree with you. I agree that he was maybe trying to get closer to God in a tight situation.
Yeah, like,
You
like
know, I hate
everybody
to go
does.
deep at a time like this, but like trying to finesse his way into, hit God with a what had happened was type of like scenario.
Right.
Yes, I feel that. I felt that vibe too. Anyone else have any thoughts? That was really, really that was a really deep and real point. Anyone else
I
that yet?
I reading those last chapters definitely made me feel like, oh yeah, he definitely wrote this for his mom. Like he kind of owed her to her, and it was kind of like his, and he even said in one part like, yeah, this is definitely my push to write a book kind of thing. And people are gonna actually want to, I don't know, this is how it came across to me a little bit, like, oh, this is why people are actually gonna want to read it, or maybe people want to like get it published because you have this really um difficult time and such. So I don't know, like it
Mm.
felt a little bit like that. And then and another thing I wanted to add, like you mentioned something about it, getting close to God when, you know, obviously this happened, but usually that's you see that a lot in individuals who you you know, they're kind of lost in the way of like spirituality and believing in God and religion, stuff like that. When things like that really hit, that's when you see like something, like they allow them to become close to like in a spiritual way, like kind of like a spiritual awakening, I would say. But I see that a lot sometimes, like in writing too, and like television, and you know, people I know, when something tragic happened, you know, that's, you know, that's when they turn to, it's quote unquote, like, you know, the spiritual gods or whatever they believe in. But I don't know. It was really sad for sure. Like, I did not see the mom dying. I thought it was the grandma because
Mm.
she brought everybody together. It's like, this is for grandma. So for me, I thought it was the grandma that was going to pass away. So for her, it was like honestly a bit shocking. Like, it was really sad. Like, I even teared up, like, I have to say. But yeah, it definitely slowed down for me. Um, and those last pages was more about um I don't know how to describe it. Like, it definitely changed the tone, and you
Mm.
know, he often was talking about his such partners or his sexuality, but this was more about him as an individual, like where he wanted to be in a way, like the next few years, like professionally, not so much about thinking about his partners or such. I don't want to keep on blabbing, so.
No, you're not blabbing. I mean, I really like what you said about maybe Saeed, the pressure of his mom dying and kind of those tenser moments, how that really was the biggest, not the biggest, but you can tell like that's a really strong point in the story and why we're reading it today, you know, because um not to generalize, but I think everybody has at least some college sescapade memoir. You know, everybody has at least like a little bit of this story. I think what makes the story really unique is the relationship with the mother and her kind of thread throughout the story. But you know what's interesting though, what you said about spirituality, it's not even that what do y'all think about this? It's not even that the mom she didn't seem, at least she wasn't painted out to lack any type of spiritual connection. You know, she was always kind of perceived as this devout Buddhist who would come home and chant for hours on end and get up, go to work, come back home and do it again. Yet there were still, you know, always a lot of heart medication on the table. Even though she was doing all the chanting, there were still a lot of unpaid bills. Even though she was doing all of the religious work, there were still a lot of eviction notices. Like, what do y'all kind of think about that? Or did you even see that kind of comparison that he was making between this kind of like life of struggle and this kind of devout devotion to spirituality? Does that make sense?
I I'd like to just say something about the previous question that you asked. I don't know if I agree with what Ron said, not liking him. I actually like Saeed throughout the whole story, throughout the whole book. And the reason being is because I kind of felt like he was a young guy. I mean, I think you had mentioned something about the 20s or something. Is he in his 20s when he's writing this book? And or maybe even younger, right? Because it's right before he goes to college, or
When he's writing it, he's probably late 20s, early 30s when he's writing it. I know.
Oh, right. Okay, when he's writing it, but when he was writing it, the age he was in the book, maybe he's like
It seems like it
young.
goes from like 12 to what, mid 20s?
Yeah, okay. So to me, I felt like there wasn't reason enough for me to like him because, or dislike him rather, because he's a young kid trying to just find himself. He's gay and he's just kind of going through the motions of his childhood, or he's not only struggling with being a boy to a man, right? But now he's also, you're including now, okay, now I'm gay. So all of that is coming into play. He doesn't know how he's coming out to his mom, a single parent household. So everything is very difficult for him. And also, once the story progresses into these last pages, yes, I do believe, you know, death can probably change him and change his personality a little bit to say, okay, now I'm gonna just trying to find myself as the man that I am. I don't know if he was kind of saying, okay, well, I'm just gonna write this book and put it this way because I know that people are gonna read it. Let's just kind of say that, not in that way, but maybe his mom dying made him see, oh wow, like this is real. This is real life stuff. This is my mother, and she went through all of this for me. Kind of what he, when he saw that insurance policy and he got the check, I felt like he was stunned, and it kind of was a reality check to him to say, oh wow, okay, I have to get myself together. So I don't know necessarily if I had that kind of take from it, that I didn't like him throughout the whole story. I think I actually loved him. I was like, wow, he was engaging. I felt like he was very upfront with his very personal stuff, and that to me was kind of scary. I was like, wow, is this what it's like to like divulge your whole life out there? I mean, yeah, everything could probably take its little twists and turns and whatever, but I don't know. That's kind of how I felt about it. I mean, and about Saeed.
I agree with some of what Liliana said and also what Barbara just said. He was reckless, you know, he was young, his mom was doing this, that, whatever, trying to survive. And then, like Barbara said, once his mom passed away, and then she, you know, she took care of this, took care of that, some things she sacrificed for, but look at all the money that was left. He didn't have to worry about paying for a funeral or anything like that. She made sure everything was taken care of. And then I don't know, not to say that he didn't care because his mother had health issues for a long, long time, but he was so concerned with himself. Same thing with his grandmother and his uncle. I don't know how much he was in touch with his family, but it took something like this to bring them all together.
Right.
So, and then I think from that point forward, see, after what happened with his mom and then knowing everything was taken care of, maybe he, you know, has become who he's supposed to be, or maybe it's like, okay, you know, this is real. Let me do what I can do, you know, going forward. So it's not just what I want, you know. So
I agree with what everyone said. I well, Ron, I would love for you to explain because I missed last week. Work has been crazy, so I've been missing stuff left and right. So I wasn't here last week, but I assume because I missed my. It wasn't that it was my favorite part of the book, the middle part, but um, as Barbara said, it is very brave. You know what I'm saying? To be able to put in the book what, you know, what you've done in your personal time, you know, there, you know, I mean, I could talk for myself, you know what I'm saying, without divulging, but there are some things that might look questionable on, you know, if I were to write that in someone in my, you know, pages of my life. Whereas to me, it seems kind of mild, but at the same time, if I thought about, you know, I don't know, you know, silly things that we you know, care about, or maybe pretend we don't care about, like body counts and, you know, the time we tried a certain drug or whatever the case may be, it's a whole other thing to put that in a book. So for me to read someone's memoir as opposed to this being fiction was just like, okay, you know, and plus, you know, if you've been to college or high school, heck, middle school, people were running through folks, you know what I'm saying? I didn't find, other than the abuse that he was allowing on himself and what he you know, put on to other people, the other stuff to me was just like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, I've been there, I've done that, you know, or I have friends that have been there, done that. Or when my mother divulged, you know, back in the you know 70s and free love and all of that, and you know, a lot of her friends have hep B, not hep, is it hep C or hep B, you know, whatever the case may be. When we talk about free love, like, I think that's part of your 20s. You know, your late teens, early 20s is to do all of those things, you know, in order to be able to experience that. But I mean, I don't know, he wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer or anything, you know, and even Jeffrey Dahmer's mother loved him, you know what I'm saying? Like, I
Right,
mean,
right,
This is so
somebody
interesting.
loves somebody. So I'm just like,
right.
how bad can you be as a person to not get redemption? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. And what did he? I agree with what you're saying, Natasha, because like, what did he really do that was so bad? So he, um, you know, got involved with straight men, or he tried to like manipulate. I mean, who hasn't really tried to manipulate a situation? I mean, not it doesn't even have to be a man and a man, or a girl and a girl, or a female and a male. It doesn't have to like take all of that away. Like, just a situation itself, it could be as small or as big as you want it to be, but we've all been there, kind of, sort of, that we're like, oh, I hope nobody finds this out. But everybody found it out with him because he actually wrote the book, you know. And we're like, Natasha says, like, okay, there's like stuff that you have done that people might judge you for. And it's just part of your teens or your 20s or whatever it is. And I just want to also add something that Tara said about the funeral. Um, I felt that when he was talking about when he received the check and he said, you only have one mother. And here he was trying to figure out, like, oh, how I'm going to pay for this, or I think it was the flowers. I don't really kind of remember what it was that he
Something
said.
else actually that he bought for her. Oh, it was to give her $800 to fix her car.
Okay,
That's what
okay.
that was for.
Yes, yes. And he was talking about that. That was in chapter 20. And it broke my heart when he said that. I didn't feel any kind of malicious way. It just broke my heart because we're children of everybody. We have parents. So if our parents ask us for something, it's like, wow, and you can't give it to them. It makes you feel horrible if, God forbid, they pass away, and then they give you and it doesn't even say how much it is, but if they give you a $2 million life insurance policy, then you feel like, wow.
It was $2 million?
No. I just said, no, I don't know how much it was, because
Oh.
it didn't. I don't think it even said it, but
It was a lot, though. It was a lot.
It was a lot.
A lot for him. Even if it was like
It was a lot.
50,000, that was a lot of money for them. Like,
based on his feeling, like even the way he said it was like,
he moved to Harlem, girl. He moved to Harlem. He said, oh, I'll be uptown in my own apartment. It had to have been a hefty.
He even said it was like double the rent or something or other. And I just felt very compassionate towards him with that, because I was like, wow, he even recognized this. He recognized the fact that I couldn't even give my mother $800. And guess what? She's only one. And not only she only one, but that's my only parent. I'm come from a single parent household. That means a whole lot more. And I guess for me, that was more, I was more compassionate to that and more intimate to that fact, because I do come from a single parent household. So that means a whole lot. If I'm not able to like break my behind to give something to my mom, and then God forbid something happens, oh, forget about it. I might as well be in the grave with her, because that's exactly, you know, how I think he kind of felt. I don't know. That's kind of my intake on that.
This is so
I also
interesting.
feel like and I get it, Ron. I understand it, because in reading certain portions, I'm like, whoa, how could you do this? Like, what are you doing? Like, come on now, right? You don't do this. But at the same time, I was wondering if it was just the outward manifestation of having to live his life unseen, right? So I feel like his memoir, you know, he's sharing you know, the plight of the queer Black man, right? And so him even having to be invisible to his mom, like this most important person in his life, where, you know, he came out to his mom and his mom was just like, let's just not talk about this, right? Like she didn't say it, but in not engaging, she said, we're not having this conversation. And so times where he felt, and I guess he was a little confused too, because he came out and then she called and said, I love you. And, you know, that kind of made him feel like, oh, okay, she sees me, she accepts me. But then to never be able to engage that in those conversations. And when he tried, she would like, are we really having this conversation right now? And so he had to retreat into himself. And I feel like some of his behavior, and this is why I agree in terms of the compassion, Barbara, you know, I feel like some of his behavior was his attempts to be seen when he had to live a life of being unseen, right? Where he had to force himself to be invisible. And so and those were maybe situations where he felt like he didn't have any control. So he takes this form of control in, you know, this kind of vulgar, you know, aggressive behavior, so he can be seen, right? And felt. And, you know, so I kind of felt like, I wonder if everything that's going on is part of that, right? Trying to be visible when he has to be invisible in so many different spaces.
Mm, mm. So can I pose this question before you respond, Ron? In all of our lives, surely we all had like a period that was not our finest hour, right? Surely we've all had it.
Oh, damn it.
Now, I have to. This is the question that I want to pose, and then I want to hear what Ron has to say. And think about that time, because you were there and you remember that time that was not your finest hour, and think of the things that you've done. Now, whatever excuse you can come up with, you can come up with a Toni Morrison, beautifully layered, thick, sympathetic, compassionate, something that evokes compassion, an excuse that is just dripping with quality forgiveness, right? However, does that mean that in those moments when you were showing your ass, as my grandmother would put it, just because you can come up with a beautiful, brilliant, deeply forgiving excuse, does that still mean that you wasn't showing your ass? Like, does it kind of take away from it a little bit if you can describe it better?
And I think that's what Saeed has done in this book. I mean, I don't take anything away from everything that's been said, but I think that you all are following the road that Saeed has sort of laid out in front of you. That, you know, I will live a predatory life, and then I will redeem everyone and bring everyone back into my corner at the end of the book. If we know somebody who is living like how Saeed was living when he was in college and post-college, you probably wouldn't want your friend to go out with Saeed. Now that, you know, he's sort of kind of, and we don't know if he's changed his ways, he's just changed the locale, so he is not open to predatory behavior anymore, at least the way he has framed it for the reader. But if you knew of Saeed, you probably would not want your friends to go out with Saeed. I mean, I wouldn't want any of my friends. I don't want to go too far off. I know Saeed. He's a beautiful person. He's a beautiful guy. Like, I've had conversations with him. I remember before he references going to Rutgers. That's when I met him, when he was still a student at Rutgers. And he's a beautiful person. But in this book, the way he presents his behavior, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you would want to have Saeed. All right, Tosh, calm down. I don't know if you would want Saeed to be your friend or to be your friend's friend. And I think that he probably felt this, and at the end of the book, he is now steering us to his more human side, so that we, as you all sort of stated, you feel for Saeed now. You know, his mother has died. He has come into some money that will change his life positively. So we've kind of like forgotten all the behavior of him, you know, saying he was going after queer men and straight men, particularly white men, to prove his point, you know, that everyone is potentially queer, or everyone, like, sexuality is fluid, which, you know, might be true. I'm not against that belief, but that's cool. But I don't know if we should dedicate that much of our lives to sort of proving it. And if we do, then, you know, the book wraps it up neatly so that we kind of are attracted to his humanness.
Well, Ron, do you think he became predatory, as you say, because of what happened to him in the beginning with him and what was it the two brothers?
Yeah, no.
No.
I feel like those were two different. He became predatory because he made that choice to become predator. He, in the book, he doesn't link his sort of adolescent and early 20s behavior to anything that happened to him as a child, at least in the book. So I can't say, you know, because these two kids laughed at him or called him faggot, he became, you know, he took on this behavior.
So
Go ahead, Tasha.
Sorry, forgive me. Hold on 1 second. Didn't he definitely link that situation when he said he came to the botanist as Cody? When he asked him his name, he was like, yeah, my name is Cody, or I can be whomever I want to be. So there was definitely still residual impact of what happened in his adolescence that came up in his more adult life. And I'm still trying to struggle around this idea of predatory. Like, what part, because I only got up to chapter 14, what part of his college interactions were predatory because he was out there. He was definitely out there, but I want to get more of understanding why being out there makes you predatory, because that's what I feel like you're making synonymous.
Out there. No. He said it very clearly multiple
he's
times that he had, you know, went directly for a certain type of man to essentially turn him out.
Yep, straight man. His straight man. That's what got him off. He was like, let me find the straight men or those who think they're straight, and let me intentionally wreck their worlds or their brains or whatever it is, give them brain, whatever. Right? Like, let me. So he was targeting specific people, and he was very intentional about it. Like, I can't remember the gentleman that he got into the car accident with on the way. But like he was like, let me see how many questions I can ask him before we get to his house, so I can determine where this is gonna go. Like, so he was methodical about it.
But aren't we
So-
all methodical about who we
Right.
pick?
So
Like,
that's what I'm.
but you call these same guys, if they're straight, players, and they're charismatic, and we love
No.
them.
So
So
I'm not saying
thank
that.
you. Hold
I'm
on.
not
I
saying
didn't get
that.
to.
We
I didn't get
call
to
them
finish.
players.
I didn't get
so-
to
I would
finish.
call them predatory as well. I would call them
I would.
Yeah, I would call
predatory
it
But we
predatory
love
as
them,
well.
though. We
I
love
would.
them.
Hold
We
on.
love
I didn't get to finish, y'all. I didn't get to finish, y'all.
Go
I know
ahead.
this is hot. This is hot and juicy. You know,
Hey,
I haven't
Miss
been here in a
Q,
while.
Go ahead, Tasha. Finish your thought, and then Ron, you can chime in next.
You know, because I'm just thinking about like how you can be intentional around who you want to engage with, but this word predatory doesn't make me feel good, because I'm also thinking about like Sex in the City. Samantha was very much out there. She knew what she wanted. She found her target and she got it. You know what I mean? And so like there are people who are very much like, even if it may not sit well with why you want to engage with other bodies, when I think predator, I think of someone who is in a non-consenting, doesn't having permission person, like regardless of how he got those people there, they indulge in these questions and they indulge with acts. And so if anybody was the predator, was Mr. Botanist, who had that other person waiting for him and was like, now you F him. I was like, oh.
And the life
But Saeed was sneaking in the grass as well. Ron, what do you?
No, I don't have anything else to really add to it. I just think that Saeed sort of in the book admits that I don't think he uses the word predatory.
No, he doesn't.
But he defines, if you define his actions by his words, you might say it was predatory.
And this kind of brings me.
And I also want to answer that if a player, assuming you mean a straight man, is going after women, he's also a predator. Now we may hold him higher in the culture, but he still has predatory behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess this brings me back to the question I posed earlier. Like, even with all of this, even like with Saeed's predatory behavior in his 20s, and with the things that we have done in our own lives, like just because we can kind of write it up, edit it up, scene it up, print it out, put it in chapters, does that still not make it predatory? Like, does that still not make it unsavory?
But we're all guilty of that. Every single one of us in our own way. Like yeah. So then,
sense, like, can he be likable or unlikable? Like,
yeah.
Or is he just?
Yeah.
But do we still want to? I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be judged by what I did in my early 20s at this point in my life, and I did some young and dumb, stupid stuff. So, you know, but to have you know a group of my peers now say, you remember that time when you were 20 and we were sitting blah blah blah? I don't want to hear that. That's not, you know, that's not right.
But what we're criticizing is how Saeed has presented this in a book. So, you know, like I've met Saeed. He seems to be a beautiful person. I'm only criticizing the pages, that structure he has presented within his book, and how he kind of, those last few chapters seem purposefully redemptive, as opposed to the earlier chapters.
But I don't think that he's even asking for redemption, because I didn't read anywhere close to the end where he was apologetic for any of those things. He probably could still be doing those things today. And not only that, like, I know a lot of Saeeds, like a lot, and they're unapologetic about that. They would write that stuff, you know, just to tell you how their weekend went. And, you know, 20 years from now, we'll still be like, whoa, good times, you know? So like, I don't think he offered any redemption at the end, because if he did, there would have been some apology, some remorse, some, you know, something where he said, oh, I performed constraint after that. That's not what he's offering. At least that's not what I saw. He never mentioned it again, because that's that. And this is something totally different. And I would be the same way. If my whoever died, my mother died, for instance, that doesn't diminish what that is, because for me that could be enjoyment. That could be how I, lay my hair down or whatever. The kink community, a lot of that stuff that he did, they do those very things that he and the guy did in the basement somewhat, and then go home to their wives or husbands or whoever they're with, because that's a form of expression. That is how they get their intimacy on. So like, what's redemption?
Yeah. So he doesn't explicitly say it, but I think in the sort of vignettes that he sets up at the end, I think that's what he wants from the reader. He wants the reader to have empathy around his mother's death. He wants the reader to have empathy around the insurance policy, as well as the time he spends with this other, yeah, in I think in Greece or Spain. So again, he doesn't ask for redemption, and I'm criticizing his text and how he presents his story to us. He doesn't explicitly ask for redemption, but I do think in going so far afield from those earlier chapters, that's what he's doing almost by default.
Are we misreading redemption for growth? Because losing a parent will make you grow up quick fast. So maybe what we may view as redemption is he grew up.
Yeah, I don't I
Preach, Linda.
can't argue that. What's that, Tosh?
I said preach, and not only just redemption, not just growth, but to see someone in their totality, right? We are constantly being forced to compartmentalize many elements of our existence, right? You have ratchet and you have regal. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're sophisticated and you got like the other folk. Why can't it just be this and situation? He had some activities going on that got him off pleasurably, and now maybe he continues and maybe he doesn't. So it's just like, why can't all of those things exist in the same body and people get read entirely? Because one thing that I remember having said with a bunch of peers, like with Michelle Obama, I would have loved for there to have been with the Obamas. I would have loved for a barbecue, like a black barbecue, to happen at the White House. I'm talking about people braiding hair, Heidi's laughing at me. I'm talking about cornrows being done, plaits in the front. But why? You know what I'm saying? They've been to them barbecues. They know what that's like. But what happened, they ended up perpetuating one aspect of Black life that if Michelle Obama even thought about twerking, like look what happened with Sasha on TikTok. It was a big to do that Sasha was doing a couple of these. It was just near uproar, and that's just dancing. So imagine what it would be like to fully embrace, like what if they had a dungeon in the White House? People would be in absolute uproar, even though people are doing that in their homes right now. So we have to be really, really careful how we perpetuate certain activities when using the words predatory. And so, who's talking about I joined that barbecue? Exactly, Heidi. If it's not for you, then it's not for you. But these terminologies are rooted in something that continues to have people piece and parse out elements of their life to make other people comfortable. So again, Linda, I appreciate you bringing that up as far as not redemption, but growth. But it also can be an ask to see Saeed in his totality.
So let's move on from this, because one thing that Linda said that I thought was really interesting was that idea of, are we confusing redemption with growth? And it's interesting you say that, because when I think about that, I think about like when someone dies, like you almost have to grow like really quickly, especially if you are the next to kin. But you stop growing in a sense, because whatever was not said between y'all, whatever was not repaired between y'all, whatever was not fixed or prettied up, it's gonna stay like that. So the road kind of ends too, right? At the same time as the journey begins, it kind of ends like at the same time in a weird way. So like in that sense, especially for Saeed, because throughout the entire novel, I want to say probably from the first chapter, he uses this term a lot, the good son or the bad son. He uses that term a lot. And I think that, I mean, I guess I want to hear some of your thoughts. Like, what do you think about that idea of never maybe getting the chance to like be the good son or be the good daughter, be the good something in someone's life before they pass away? It feels like he still never got a chance to be a good son to her, especially when he got the check for the insurance money. He wrote like, oh my God, we could have got her the good flowers. We could have got her the rose gold casket. We could have buried her in the designer dress. You know, he's still like thinking about these.
You're frozen. You were frozen, Brandon, for a second.
Oh, I was just saying that it seems like that he keeps thinking about the ways in which he could have been a better son to his mom, even in her death. Like when he gets the check and he's thinking about all the things he could have bought her.
One of the people I'm sorry, one of the people that he thinks at the end of the book is his therapist. Mm-hmm. So he has probably had therapy. I don't know if it was during or after or what.
That was in the acknowledgments. I didn't read them.
Yeah, at the end.
I guess reading the pages and such, like it definitely was a wake up call and a hard time, like realization, like even when he was going to the hospital, like he didn't know how to react, like everything seemed so unreal for him. And even for me, as I was reading through it, I was just like, you know, that moment, like you think about that a lot. And for me, like when he came out to his uncle in his car, saying that I was gay, it just felt like that moment that's like, listen, like anything could happen at this moment, and I'm not shying away, I'm not hiding anymore, like who I am truly am, and being vocal about this. So for me, that was like a turning point, like, yes, like, you know, I'm gay. And the way that his uncle reacted, like, he's like, yeah, I know, like he I guess this is what I got from it, that he seemed content with that reaction and how, you know, he was treated by his uncle, I guess. And I think that was like an opening moment for like growth between them. And even like in his call to his grandma after his mom died, like he will occasionally call her, and he did not call her before that. And so after that, he was calling more often, and, you know, hearing his grandma say like, oh, I miss her a lot, like it was like a connecting wave of him with his grandma. So he definitely, like, that growth and, you know, learning from that moment, like I saw that in the car with his uncle, and then the calls with his grandma.
It's like almost like, okay, since I'm done, I can't be a better son than I was, I can at least try to be a better nephew, or I can at least try to be a better grandson. You know, that's kind of like what I got from what you're saying, Liliana.
I did have a question about that part though, because for me, it felt a little unfulfilled, even when his uncle said to him, yeah, I know. And then that was it. Because I think, didn't he get the same thing from his mom to a certain extent? Like she was just like, okay, you know. And so I almost thought that he would say something like, here we go again. Because it's one thing to hear what I'm saying to you, that I'm gay, and you knowing it. But it's a whole other thing for you to let me talk about my life. Because, I have those moments myself where, like, and my mom, she's gotten a lot better over the years. She'll ask about my partner, or, ask what are we doing, and that sort of thing, which to me means that this means a whole lot more to me than me just coming to you and saying, hey, I'm gay. And then you just kind of look at me and blink like, okay, don't ask, don't tell. Engage with me. Ask about my life. How am I doing? How is my partner doing? Or are you dating? I like to meet them, that sort of thing. And so I just kept waiting for him to feel some kind of way about it. But of course, because, the focus is supposed to be on the mom. So saying this out loud, Ron, I get it. You know, a small smidgen of it, of like, it's really supposed to focus on the mom, even though he did bring up his sexuality, you know, to his uncle. But I just like, oh, but it's the exact same thing as when your mom kind of didn't really acknowledge you.
But his uncle did smile though.
Mm-hmm.
Once he told, he smiled. Wasn't he
Yeah,
driving
I
or
guess.
something?
There was
Yeah,
some.
I guess sometimes that's all you can get. Yeah.
And it seems like none of them have a close relationship. Like, remember when the mom hadn't died yet, but like a lot of relatives had kept like coming to the grandmother's house, and he was saying he just kept walking the dog just so he wouldn't have to be around them. You know, it seemed like he didn't have a close relationship with any of them, not only his mother, but or grandmother or uncle or cousins, nobody. He seemed like he was that close with that. Even if he was straight, would be asking about his personal, you know, intimate relationships. Does that make sense? It seems like that's just not how they vibed as a family. Like if somebody died, they
Everybody was caught up in their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the lines he said that I thought was so powerful was right after the mom dies, and actually when him and his uncle are getting the tasks together to bury her. They're on that page. It's on page 172 if you have the real book. That very last line in the second paragraph, this line is so powerful to me. He wrote, "There were no masks left for me to hide behind." Meaning like it didn't, I mean, I don't know what he really meant by that, but like that line was just so powerful to me. Like there were no masks left for me to hide behind. So yeah, I am gonna tell my uncle I'm gay. Why not? Like there's nothing left for me to run from at this point.
Yeah, because if the main person that you ever wanted to confirm you as a person is left the earth, kind of like screw everybody else, you know. Yeah, I understood that completely. When I told my mother, you know, after that, I was bold as heck because I'm like, okay, she knows everything else. I could care less what you think. You know, I don't have to hide from anybody else because the main person who means the most to me knows. And, you know, yeah, I got that.
Yeah, before we move on, does anyone have any other like standout lines that they thought were really good? There was this line on 159 that I thought was really powerful. Right before his mom died, when he was like at her, it's on page 159. He is at her bedside and he says, he's talking about like in his head, he's talking about how his mom's sick. He's gonna have to fly back and forth from Memphis to Jersey to like take care of her, but everything's gonna be all right. The boss will figure it out. And he says, speaking of him and his mother, he says, "Maybe the two of us were, in fact, as special as I hadn't before dared to believe." That was really powerful to me. It's like at her, you know, thinking about how he's going to make all of these special arrangements to be there for her while she's, you know, dying. You know, that idea of like, you know what, maybe we are this special. Like maybe we are like special enough for this level of sacrifice. I don't know. That line was really powerful to me.
The whole book overall, I thought was powerful. You know, as far as like as far as memoirs go, I felt like he set the book up really well to sort of keep us engaged through the book. It it didn't feel like there was any sort of lulls in his writing or in telling his story, which which oftentimes is not the case. One of the things I think he made a good choice, which was to keep the book relatively short. And in keeping the book short, there was no sort of space for him to even get lost, lost in quotes, and not keep the reader like fully engaged through the book. It just felt like, I don't even know if it was 200 pages, but it felt like an ideal length. And I wish more people who wrote memoirs would, take that into consideration, that all of your life is not like worth being in the book. So, and I wonder what Saeed left out of the book. Like he may have submitted 50 more pages or 30 more pages,
Well, we talked about race a lot, and we talked
Mm.
about how it only kind of erupted, if you will, in that middle part. I
Mhm.
know I remember all of us kind of waiting for more race involved scenes and topics.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe that's some of the stuff, because
Yeah.
I think it worked really well,
And that race never really comes into play in the book, you know.
except with the escapades.
Race plays a role in the sense that he's sort of dating white men, but it doesn't come in like as a tool plot twist or a tool by itself. It is always kind of foundation for the rest
Yeah,
of the book.
yeah. It's kind of like how he's fighting with race, not
Hmm.
necessarily how it's like interjected in his life and every.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Where some books are about Black identity, his book is not. His book is about his queerness, and he happens to be Black. So.
Yeah, because I went and looked at his Instagram after reading, because when I first asked the questions, I was like, okay, and hate to categorize people and stuff. I'm like, I wonder what kind of gay he is, because there's some stuff that's missing. You know what I'm saying? So I went and looked, and I said, okay, I get that. I see what it is. Like there's certain kind of, there are just some who have aspirations of going to New York and getting lost in the middle, the excitement of all the things that are available to you, which is white men and all, whatever, because you have access to these things now, whereas in bum F Texas, you know what I'm saying, you stayed with your own. And especially in this area, Dallas is synonymously known where like all the Black people congregate to one place, even though they're located all over the place. If you want to do anything that's Black oriented, you have to go to South Dallas. You know what I'm saying? Or if someone's doing something in downtown Dallas, that's kind of how you might bump heads with like maybe the majority minority people. But there isn't like these clusters of places, and so when you go to Cedar Springs, it's a white owned street. And matter of fact, we're always boycotting one club or another off of Cedar Springs because there is no Black representation. Every single bar or restaurant on the gay strip is owned by white people, and so it made sense to me, because if he was getting out there on Cedar Springs on a random Thursday or Friday, chances are he would be hobnobbing with mostly white guys. And so to me that made sense, but yeah, I had to go be nosy, because I'm like, he's not talking about what I would think that he would be talking about when it comes to being a Black man in the South. And so I don't know.
Natasha, when you say you went to his Instagram to find out what kind of gay person or gay man he was or is, what did you discover?
Yeah, can you unpack that a little?
Oh God, I don't want to talk about it. No.
Because I also follow him on Instagram, and I can't tell. He seems very benign on Instagram.
Mm.
No.
He is very, we are the world. The world is my oyster. I can have whoever I want.
Okay.
I did notice that, like, he on his one thing where he was talking about, you know, which is a huge thing, no fats, no femmes, no blacks, no Asians, you know what I'm saying? That's synonymous for you wanting to go and chase a white guy. Because black people are not, you know what I'm saying, like, black guys don't usually say that unless they have a particular, you know, preference for white men.
It says that on his Instagram?
No, they said it in his book.
Oh.
Yeah, when he was doing a search for certain guys, and he would see on their profiles, no fats, no femmes.
Oh,
no, you know.
yeah, when he would see on their profiles, yeah.
Yeah. White men say that.
Oh,
okay. I see what you're saying now. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for unpacking that for us. I appreciate that. Okay, because this whole time, to be quite frank, I was still a bit. I know we talked about if it's not said, if their race isn't said, then it is assumed that they are white. I know we talked about that, but I guess I wasn't fully convinced until right now. So thank you. What else do y'all want to kind of bring up? We have about 15 minutes left. Does anyone have anything what they want to bring up, either in the last few pages or throughout the whole book that we haven't discussed yet, or maybe you thought back?
I was gonna add the ending of him choosing to go to Spain and meeting this woman, approximately his mom's age. It was just interesting how he ended in that way. I know that he had chosen to go, I guess, there because his mom had written something about traveling with him and such. But it was just very particular how he gravitated. So I wonder if that was him trying to make up and connect with somebody of his mom age, or connect and like, or maybe missing his mom and such.
Yeah, you know, Lillian, it's funny you say that, because what I was thinking, especially with, it was Esther, right? Her name was Esther. Like with Esther and even that very short relationship they had, you know, Liliana, maybe you agree with me. The way he wrote it, it almost felt like that relationship was closer than the relationship he had ever had with his mom, between him and his mom. Even that when they first meet, that first encounter of her like grabbing his hand and shaking it, and then them immediately going to the museum together, looking at art, having lunch. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't even think we've seen one meal with him and his mother together.
Right, and there was more compassion for sure. Like the conversation, the way, you know, he was gravitating towards her. It felt a lot more compassionate for sure.
Yes. Did anyone else want to chime in on that or anything that's happened throughout the book? If you weren't here last week, we talked a lot about bravery, and we did a little writing prompt and writing exercise, and we talked about the bravery that it takes to write this memoir, because it's not, you know, it's pretty mundane. The settings are mundane. They're not in New York City. They're not, you know, in a downtown London town or something like that. They're not. He's not like wearing flashy clothes. He doesn't have a great car. I don't think he has a car at all. You know, and for some reason though, his life like jumps off the page. You know, and we talked a lot about that bravery being a big part of that, him being brave enough to put his business out there and to tell, you know, some of the most humiliating maybe moments that's ever happened to him. You know, that's the sweet spot right there. And I was wondering, you know, a lot about that, and some of the things that we said last week about bravery and how it, I guess, when you immortalize yourself like this in a way that takes so much out of you, I guess I was wondering, you know, is that it? Like, can you be brave twice? Can you be brave? Can you be brave more than once? Does that make sense? Because I went to, there's this rare bookstore on the west side, on the Upper West Side, I think it's literally called West Side Rare Bookstore, and it's tiny. And I went there over the weekend with my friend, and there was a lot of Saeed's poetry in the book that I never read before. And I was telling her we were reading this book and whatever, and I was like, he's so brave. He's talking about these very candidly, you know, some of the most embarrassing moments of his life. And she was like, I wonder how it feels to peak at that. I wonder how it feels to peak at that level of bravery. Can you be that brave twice? Is it possible? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Even to write poetry takes a level of bravery, at least to me anyway. I always feel like poetry, because it sort of filters down the writing to its essence, you don't have space for the reader or the writer to get lost. You kind of have to get right to the point. And even though getting right to the point may mean speaking in a metaphor, but still that attempt or that goal is to be as honest and clear as possible and as quickly as possible with poetry. And Saeed's first book, Prelude to a Bruise, was a book of poetry, and he is a poet. He's a word guy. He does a lot of things actually. He was an editor on BuzzFeed, and he had a TV show on Twitter. I still don't understand how that works, but yeah. So he's a talented person. But even just again to write your memoirs at a young age takes a level of bravery. That you can be brave and run into a fire and save someone, but it's equally as brave to tell somebody your life story that might not be as shiny and as heroic as you may think it is or want it to be.
Yes.
I was gonna say that I think he's already being brave more than once, because it's not just one copy of the book. There are multiple copies of the book. So there's this constant discovering of his narrative over and over and over and over again. So it becomes this continuous action to be present in the world, knowing that this narrative exists, right? And that's for anyone who writes a memoir, right? That's like someone putting out their journals, putting out their diaries. You choose to do that. It's not a singular moment. You are putting the first stone in the pond of multiple ripples.
So you're
that
saying
go
you just like it, wash your hands and be done of it. Like
you can't.
You live it
Once it's out. Once it's out, you can never take it back. And so in understanding that ripple, and it's a ripple that goes out but also returns. Right. You know, we always talk about ripples like, oh, I'm watching it go outwards, but every time someone engages with him, that engaged with the work, you're being met with a mirror of what you shared and someone's interpretation of what you shared. So then it's double fold.
Tasha.
So, yes?
I don't know if you remember, do you remember where Lena Durham, I think her name is, put her memoir out there and basically admitted that she did something to her sister in a sexual manner. I don't know if y'all, because I'm thinking about memoirs and how stuff can, you can be brave and it has a ripple effect. And basically she had somewhat sort of molested her sister. And like nobody told her, like, girl, some stuff you don't put in there, or you would think that you wouldn't. But anyway, that you triggered me to think like, yeah, that stuff is permanent. For real.
Bravery is permanent. That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know about that story. But and I don't want to go on a tangent. What does it mean to acknowledge when you may have done something wrong? And again, I don't know the story, but I'm just speaking about when I was working with this nonprofit. and we would work the stroll, one of my coworkers, one of his clients had divulged that they had pedophilial thoughts, right? They hadn't enacted on any of their thoughts, but they had thoughts. And when we had to do our our case studies and so forth, the initial response was to be like, oh, that person's effed up, I got kids, you can't do this, whatever. And I was just like, well, take a step back. The person is actually crying out for help. They are telling you that these things are in their mind and they want to rack up the tools that's needed and not to go past a boundary. And when I've had many clients who have talked to me about these murky waters around what have happened in the homes, I offered that what happens in the home, even though you may not have the words to articulate it, gets perpetuated as normalcy until otherwise stated. And so the same thing with this person, brave for her, because that acknowledgement, that sharing could have permanently casted you off.
Yes.
And been a product of cancel culture.
That part.
So what does it mean to share in order to heal, right? So that it doesn't get replicated again. You know what I'm saying? So that we have to really delve into what those things are when people are being brave. And it's not even just, and even go further, what does it mean to be brave in your action, but being also brave for others?
One thing I want to hear someone talk about is, that idea, around that idea, Tasha, I don't think you were here for our first, or maybe it was our second session, when we were talking about the scene with the 40-year-old man in the public bathroom, Saeed's first sexual encounter. That was obviously very brave for him to put that out. But at the same time, in that sense, he is exposing somebody else too, right? He's exposing somebody's behavior that very well did happen once and probably happened multiple times. So in that sense, it's almost like that idea of using the example that you just gave us, that idea of kind of taking accountability and responsibility and being brave and sharing something because you don't know, it may help someone else. That idea is so delicate. And I wonder what y'all think about that, in the sense of how risky it is to kind of tamper with such a delicate thing that you don't know. It could go either way. Something that you cannot predict, something that is unpredictable. This is tricky, this is a tricky space I find myself in with Saeed's story, because I think it's written so brilliantly, but it brings up so many more questions, not about Saeed at all, but about society as a whole, right? Like about all of the way that I see the world, the way my own morals, my own ethics, and what I expect of other people. That's kind of the questions that this book brings up for me, because I agree with Batasha. I feel like I know a lot of Saeeds, I feel like I know a lot of Saeeds. My brother is a Saeed, my brother Casey. And I'm wondering, so his story isn't breakthrough to me, but it's the way that it has me thinking about society and how delicate and risky I believe it to be. Does that make sense? No?
I'll just piggyback off you. I put in the chat also that one, he protected the anonymity of the person. He never disclosed a name.
I think he changed names for everybody, right?
Right. So this is umpteen years ago. We can't place that person. You know what I mean? The same way when we're in forums, they tell you lessons leave, but lessons leave, but stories stay. When you're working within the medical field, you have to worry about HIPAA compliant. I cannot share anything that will allow you to identify the person that I'm speaking of, right? So I can't say my client at 2:00. I'm not saying a name, but I've given you something that is indicative that you can search and find out who that is. So there's a way to be brave and still preserve the identity of the person that you had that moment with, so that the lesson becomes the predecessor of the actual experience. the message that you want to get across becomes the focal point and not the actual action, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Yeah, that's what he did for me. I think that's what this memoir, exactly what this memoir did for me. It took away the people, the names, right? They're changed anyway. It took away the names and kind of inserted like maybe bifocals, so I could see society a little bit, a little fuller, a little richer. Anyone else have any closing thoughts?
I have one closing thought.
Take it away.
So during the summer, we had a whole new group of people come and join us in the book club. I don't know where they came from. They came in as a posse, and they've been with us every week since. But one of those members, Zodis Kihani, she's celebrating her birthday. Zodis?
My Sagittarius sister.
Miss Zodis? So we just want to wish you a happy birthday. I know this is your second night of birthday parties, because last night you got a little shout, and I guess you had some drinks. And then tonight, before you came in here late, so we know you was drinking all day today because it is your birthday.
I was late.
You weren't as early as you normally are. So
5 minutes.
that's usually a sure sign of somebody celebrating their birthday. But we just want to send you love and many birthday wishes. You've been with us like almost every week since the middle of the summer. And I appreciate that. I always say that, you know, I could be in this book club by myself and it would not be the same experience. But it's people like you who make this space a beautiful space. And we,
Thank you.
you know, we hope that you continue to join us for many more. I'm not even going to give a fake like an age, but for many more years that you join us because you make this space an important space.